Welcome back to Oceanic and Polar Experts. Today we have a special guest here to share with us her research and experiences in polar law studies. She is Li Xueping, a distinguished Chinese professor at Wuhan University's Research Institute of International Law, a key research institute of humanities and social sciences recognized by the Ministry of Education of China. With expertise in international law, she has been engaged in teaching and researching on basic theories of international law, World Trade Organization law, international labor law, polar law, and other related fields for many years. She has completed over 20 research projects, published 60-plus papers, authored more than 10 academic monographs, and delivered more than 30 consulting reports to national ministries and enterprises, earning multiple academic awards. So to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I am now a professor of international law of the Law School of Wuhan University. My research fields concentrate on international public law or public international law, especially the WTO law and the polar law. And now this year, I was invited by the government to participate in the expedition to the Antarctic, now because of my research in the field of polar law.
I see. Law is indeed a very important subject to study. Why is it important to study this specific part, the polar laws?
It's a long story, I think. Comparatively speaking, I think I'm a newcomer in this field because I was invited by some other professors of natural sciences in polar studies to discuss the legal issues involved in their work in the year 2015. But in that year, I did very little about polar legal issues. In the year 2016, in Wuhan University, there was a meeting held by our law school on the topic of international law. And in that meeting, I met with a professor of polar law from Ep3 University, whose name is Gudmund Alfredson. He is very popular and very renowned professor in polar law or polar legal studies. And he invited me to participate in the polar law symposium held in Rovaniemi, Finland, in the year 2017. So from that year on, I put a lot of my spirits in the field of polar law study or polar legal studies. And I found there are so many interesting legal issues in this field. So, yeah, I think the first reason for my studies in this field is my interest. The second is the importance to communicate with the foreign professors on the legal issues in polar regions to promote the development of polar law. And the third, China is an observer of the Arctic Council and a consultative party of the ATCM Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. That is to say, for the sake of our country or China's activities in polar regions, the government necessitates the support of polar law. So now those are the reasons or the for for my studies in polar law.
Thank you. So in so many years of digging into this field, How do you usually study polar laws?
Perhaps that is a little bit complicated in my mind now because in China, in my viewpoints, the polar law studies is always progressing with different directions or dimensions. But for me, because of my very solid foundation in the field of public international law, and
Yeah.
for the polar law, in my mind, it is very specific in the field of public international law. So, now because of the foundation of the fundamental theories and the principles of public international law, so it is perhaps easy for me to study the polar law.
So, on your studies, are there any interesting findings from your research that you would like to share with us?
Uh, Now, for such a question, I could not say that I have found some interesting issues in polar law studies. But in my mind, the polar governance under the ATCM very complicated because of different countries' interests and rights under the Antarctic Treaty System. So for me, I think in most outstanding in my studies is the theories I created for Chinese international legal theories put into my polar law studies. So that is perhaps an approach or a way for legal studies.
I see. Can you introduce us a bit more about the theories? I know it must have required a lot of professionalism and many years of research to develop these theories.
Um, It is, I think, a little bit difficult to say because just as I told you about the reasons for my studies in this field, I think I'm always young in in my studies or in my research. That is to say, to keep my curiosity in doing research. So if you ask my experience or my understanding on my studies or on my research, I think curiosity is always there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's the most important part of a research.
Yes, of course. Yes.
So, when you are studying laws, have you found any challenges or obstacles that you had to overcome?
Yes, of course. I think for every person, if they are going to achieve something, especially if he or she sets targets or future career, he or she has to overcome some difficulties or obstacles. And for
Yeah.
me, I think there are perhaps some difficulties, and whether or not now, because in my mind, anyway, if I was indulging, if I was or I am indulging in pursuing my research, especially as a very specific topic, I
Yeah.
will first find as much as possible the materials to read, to find the shortcomings of those reading materials, including the papers or even works. And after that, I will give some of my own conclusions or my opinions or even criticisms on those reading materials. The second
Yeah.
step is to list all the questions or the problems I'm going to resolve under such a topic. And third, I will ask some of my colleagues, especially their research fields are very close to mine, to ask their opinions or suggestions on such a topic. That means what questions or what specific issues I should observe highly. So I am very thankful to their suggestions, very, very kind and considerate suggestions. The last step is I concentrate my even time or spirit in a period on this topic to do
Yeah.
my own research, especially to initiate my creative ideas or thinkings under this topic. That is very important because creative thoughts or thinking is very, very important for doing research.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of critical thinking, like making criticisms, you mentioned, um, how do you think it
Yeah.
applies to specific issues? Like what kind of criticism you might make, and for what kind of issues you might
Yeah,
accept?
yeah, I think as you guys are pursuing your studies, and especially when talking with other people, I think the critical thinking is so important that you can or you will continue your conversation or your talks with other people. For doing research, especially on the specific topic, critical thinking means the logic and also your creativeness.
Yeah, yeah,
So I always encourage my students, I mean the students, including the LLM students and PhD candidates under my supervision, to do that research with critical thinking. Now, otherwise, you will just follow the thinkings or the viewpoints of the other scholars without any new creation or even just track the reading materials together in some order, I think.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Do you have any recommendations of reliable resources that you find particularly useful or worth reading in this field?
I think different topics or different subjects or different major has different resources for research on the specific topic. And for international law, now it is a little bit different from those domestic law. So for me, or for even the international legal scholars, I think the websites of international organizations or institutions such as United Nations or Antarctic Treaty Secretariat or World Trade Organization or World Bank Group. I mean, those websites are very important for us because now they're aware from those websites we can find almost all the new informations in different fields. That is very, very important. That means our research should go first under the leadership of those informations. I mean, the newest informations
Yeah.
in those websites. I mean, the websites of international organizations. The second, we have the database. The database. Now, such as in our university, we have just all now where we can find the American laws and regulations or even their policies on certain issues and also Western law and dispute settlement commentary. Now, those databases give us those reading materials, including the original laws, regulations, and also the original papers. I mean, the journal papers. And the third, of course, those publishers or publishing companies. Now, usually in China, some foreign publishers opened their businesses in China. So we can buy the electronic books from those publishers in low price. We know the books are really expensive,
Yeah.
especially in English. The last is the Chinese database including Chinese books in public international law or public law, and also the journals. Now, those are the resources. Now, if you have set up a topic to do your research, now those resources are very necessary to give us the confidence to do our research on that specific topic.
Thank you. So the next question. What specific skills or techniques do you attribute to your outstanding performance in your current job?
About my job, that is very hard to say, strange for me because I think I have no other techniques except as a professor. So I think I have mastered the language, especially Chinese, including writing, writing, written Chinese and also English, now whether in written or in spoken. I think those languages are also very important for me. That is to give my confidence to be a professor.
Yeah, language skills are really important.
Yeah.
And also, I bet it helps to communicate with foreign experts in laws as well.
Yes, of course. Now, because in my mind, a scholar in the field of public international law now should be open-minded. Should be open-minded. Now, that is to say, not only communicate and talk with our Chinese professors in this field, but also the foreign professors. So I did contact some of my good friends who are working in foreign universities, such as Akureyri University, Iceland, and also Oslo University in Norway, and also the Tresberg University in Holland, and Alaska University, United States of America, so on and so forth, and also Kobe University, Japan. Now, I mean, just in the field of polar law, I communicate with those professors working in those foreign universities to encourage and to inspire my thinkings in polar legal studies. That is very, very important. And for Chinese professors, of course, we have the same surroundings or environment to do our research. So we sometimes even came together offline to have a small academic meetings. That means within 10 or 20 professors or associate professors together to discuss on certain specific topic in polar law. So that's very interesting, very, very interesting. That means to make your academic friends
Yeah.
and spend as many as possible. As
Yeah.
many as possible. So on one hand, I think now those friends, by communication with those friends, I feel very happy in my studies and in my research. Now, on the other hand, now their suggestions or opinions, or even their sometimes complaints, complaints can encourage and inspire my research, even give me creative thinkings.
Yeah. 还30分钟. Do you have any advice for those people interested in joining this big group of polar research experts and digging into this field?
Yes, of course. As far as I know, the group of polar law studies, I mean the scholars, the group of scholars in polar law studies is not as large as those in other fields of public international law, such as WTO law or UN law or law of the sea or space law or cyberspace law. I discussed such a situation with the foreign professors, I mean international professors, and also Chinese professors. We didn't we didn't find the key reasons yet. So it is very interesting even today because of climate change. We know the legal issues raising in polar regions are becoming more and more and sharp specific and more specific and more specific. Now, especially for polar studies, there are some scholars would like to suggest to do certain specific research like private international law in polar regions or international economic law in polar regions. But still, in my mind, it is relatively narrow. I mean, today for polar law studies. So
Yeah.
here, I sincerely welcome now those who are interested in polar law studies to join us to enlarge the group of polar law studies. So that is my my suggestion. And I think if those who are interested in polar law studies join us, would find it important and interesting in this field. Now, because we know the polar regions are so, how to say, amazing now with intrinsic value of um, science and also the wilderness and the other aesthetic issues there. And I think with the development of the natural science in polar regions, for us international legal scholars, there must be more and more topics to do our research there.
Yeah.
That means to combine international law and the natural science. So that is very, very important, especially as I just mentioned with the climate change in polar regions. So now we have to study and do our research on polar law or polar legal issues, combining the findings and the outcome of natural science or natural scientific research. So that will be, I think that is becoming more and more important, more and more specific.
Yeah, yeah. It must be very fascinating to study in this field the laws of polar regions. I always wanted to go to the polar regions like the Arctic and the
Really? You
Antarctic.
are very, very welcome. Welcome you to join us.
I really want to explore more about the regions, but I haven't got a chance to really go there or do anything like that.
Okay, please be ready for your joining us.
And also, I always think that it is a very important issue. I was kind of surprised that not so many people have heard of it before. It's
Yes,
it's quite a
yeah,
pity
yeah,
that they don't. Yeah.
yeah. It is, how do you say, sometimes very quiet. I think for polar law studies, it is very quiet. On one hand, I think all of us scholars, how this indulging, interesting in this field. On the other hand, because polar regions, the very projective issue in polar regions is environmental protection. So when we are taking into consideration about those issues, I mean the issues of environmental protection, it's will of course necessitates the human beings or humankind to undertake the obligations or
Yeah.
responsibilities in polar regions. So I don't know, perhaps one day in the future, when the legal system of environmental protection in polar regions are more mature, perhaps the team for polar law studies will be enlarged, I think.
Yeah, I believe it will. It's such a great field, exciting and fascinating. Thank you so much for coming today, and we're so lucky, more than lucky
Thank
to
you
have
very
you
much
here.
for your so fascinating questions, and I sincerely invite you to join us now, whether for natural science or social science in polar regions. Very interesting. Thank you.
It's so good to have an interview with you and hear about your valuable insights. Thank you.